Tonight, a former Republican congressman who led the charge to impeach Bill Clinton joins us. Bob Barr will discuss how Democrats are handling the possible impeachment of Donald Trump, Trump's latest racially charged comments, and more. Plus, a senior writer for Salon will join us and explain why she says President Trump is intentionally making his race for re-election about race. And later, an advisor to NASA will discuss the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 and where the space program stands now, half a century later. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman in for Richard French. Before we get to the continued fallout over President Trump's comments that are being called racist, we have an update on rising tensions in the Mideast. President Trump announcing that the U.S. has shot down an Iranian drone that he says was flying in the Strait of Hormuz. He says it came within 1,000 yards of a U.S. warship and ignored multiple calls to stand down. Here's the commander-in-chief.
This is the latest of many provocative and hostile actions by Iran against vessels operating in international waters. The United States reserves the right to defend our personnel, our facilities, and interests, and calls upon all nations to condemn Iran's attempts to disrupt freedom of navigation and global commerce.
Meantime, the president holding his first rally since his tweets aimed at 4 Democratic women of color, and he's pouring more gasoline on the firestorm he sparked. In Greenville, North Carolina, President Trump continuing his attacks against 4 minority congresswomen, and the crowd was loving it.
Representative Ilhan Omar.
The president in a tweet over the weekend telling the 4 lawmakers to go back to the countries they originally came from, even though 3 of them were born in the U.S. and all 4 are American citizens. Today, the president tried to distance himself from the crowd's reaction.
I was not happy with it. I disagree with it. But again, I didn't say that, they did.
Despite what President Trump said today, last night his attacks were personal and nasty.
Representative Ayanna Pressley. Is she related in any way to Elvis?
The president proudly refusing to call Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez by her full name.
I don't have time to go with 3 different names. We'll call her Cortez.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who came here as a young girl from Somalia and was given asylum, responding to his attacks in a simple tweet saying, quote, "I am where I belong, in the people's house, and you're just going to have to deal." This morning, other Democrats condemned Trump's latest lines of attack.
The president once again whipped up a toxic brew of racism, xenophobia, and nativism.
The president's overheated rhetoric caused a Democratic congressman to draft an article of impeachment for the House to vote on yesterday. It overwhelmingly failed. Al Green of Texas was behind it. Here he explains why.
Resolved that Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is unfit to be president, unfit to represent the American values of decency and morality, respectability and civility, honesty and propriety, reputability and integrity.
Bob Barr joins us now. He's a former Republican congressman representing Georgia and also a former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. Congressman, what was your reaction when you heard President Trump tell 4 members of Congress, if you don't like it, you can leave and go back to your country? What was your immediate personal reaction?
That is basically a throwback to the 1960s. I was in college during the Nixon administration back in the late 60s, and there was the same types of sentiments expressed back then. So to me, my reaction was, this is nothing new. This is simply the way the president speaks. And there are a lot more important things to concern me, and which I think would be of concern to the Congress than getting into a spat between the president and some of his detractors.
Certainly a different environment in 2019 than it was in the 60s that you were referencing. You don't think that those comments are worthy of censure or perhaps even worse?
Good heavens, no. Condemning or censuring a president because he says something that the majority in the Congress doesn't like, if we held to that standard, nothing would ever get done. We'd be in a constant battle of, well, we don't like what you said. we want to censure you. To me, it's beneath the dignity of the entire government, including the Congress, to get involved in such silliness.
You've additionally said that censuring a president for remarks that somebody doesn't like is making a mountain out of a molehill. And as you just repeated, every president says things that their critics don't like. But for a lot of people, these remarks, and especially in the context of this president, were a lot worse than just not liking them. They were, in their mind, racist or xenophobic, divisive, hateful. Many of the same qualities, by the way, the Republicans chide those 4 members of Congress for. That, to me, feels like it's describing a lot more than just a mountain, making a mountain out of a molehill, isn't it?
If you say anything, if you make any criticism of somebody and they happen to be a minority or a person of color, nowadays that immediately is turned back on you and you're charged with racist remarks. To me, we've just gone so far down this road of criticizing everybody for everything that we can no longer have a reasonable discourse about anything.
Well, forget about the criticism for a second. If somebody is racist, if a majority of the country has come to a determination that somebody in the government is racist, is that, to your mind, an impeachable offense? Is being a racist impeachable?
The term has come to mean nothing. It's a term that is thrown around so much that simply saying, oh, you said something that appears to be racist, therefore you are a racist, therefore you ought not to hold public office, is setting a standard that is so low and so beyond the bounds of what our government is supposed to be doing that, to me, again, it undercuts and denigrates the whole notion of a government that is supposed to be governing.
I'm sorry, Congressman, it sounds like you're saying that being racist is a low bar in this country. I mean, racism, I realize it's a subjective thing that people can decide, 2 people can come to a different opinion on whether somebody is racist or whether it's not, but you're saying racism is a low bar?
No, you're misinterpreting what I'm saying, or maybe I'm not making myself clear. What I'm saying is because the term has come to mean virtually nothing, because it simply means you made a comment or said something about somebody who happens to be a minority or a person of color, therefore you are a racist, has set the bar so low that it means nothing.
Fair enough. And so claiming or accusing somebody of being a racist seems to happen in a more knee-jerk fashion than it did in years past. But let's say the public collectively decided that politician X is racist, regardless of whether that definition is fungible, regardless of how often that accusation is made. A majority of the country decides that politician X is racist. Is being considered a racist, in your mind, impeachable?
No. If one is a racist, it could very well be. If one engages in racist acts, that certainly could be. But simply because a lot of people think, oh, that person is racist, to me it's a non-argument. It means nothing nowadays. But if somebody is racist, in other words, if they take actions against somebody purely based on their race, then that's something very different. But what we're talking about nowadays is far more vague and amorphous than what you're talking about. We're talking about a difference between actually being a racist and taking actions that are racist and calling people a racist simply because they say things about people who might be of a different race that we don't like.
Moving on, you played an enormous role in the impeachment of Bill Clinton. You were an impeachment manager. You were one of the more vocal supporters of impeachment. In the impeachment charges, Clinton lied to the grand jury and he attempted to obstruct justice. That was in the impeachment or indictment. Trump lied to the American people, Stormy Daniels, the Trump Tower meeting statement, and he clearly attempted to obstruct justice. The only reason he may not have actually lied to a grand jury is that he didn't sit for one that Bob Mueller called. Even his attorneys publicly feared that he would lie under oath. Given those similarities and your role in impeaching Bill Clinton, why aren't you the first person in line to impeach Donald Trump?
I'm not the first person to call for the impeachment of Donald Trump, because simply saying that, well, a president said something that is untrue is an impeachable offense would mean that every single person who has ever occupied the office of the presidency should either not have occupied that office or should be impeached. Impeachment was never intended as a tool with which to batter somebody or remove them from office because they say something that is untrue. That's very different from saying something that is untrue intentionally under oath in an official judicial proceeding, which is what Bill Clinton did.
That's half of it, sir. But Bob Mueller's report indicates at least 10 incidents where the president, in his mind, may have appeared to attempt to obstruct justice. He didn't make that conclusion because he didn't think it was his role, but he came up with 10 examples where the president may have attempted to obstruct justice. And given that President Clinton was impeached for attempting to obstruct justice, why not the similarity on that count?
Bill Clinton obstructed justice. There was a long list of acts in which he engaged, which were supported by evidence developed by the Judiciary Committee after extensive hearings, and which were included in the Starr report, that were the basis for those charges. Clinton was not impeached because he may have perhaps attempted to obstruct justice. He was impeached because he obstructed justice.
Sir, no, sir. The impeachment document against Bill Clinton was attempted to impeach, or it's attempted to obstruct justice. It was not point blank obstructed justice.
What Bill Clinton did is he went to individuals and directed individuals to take actions to assist Monica Lewinsky so that she would not, in fact, testify against him or provide evidence against him. That is obstruction of justice.
Which may be the case, and I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but the actual impeachment charge was attempted to obstruct justice.
Well, I don't think you're sorry to interrupt, but I understand certainly what you're saying. But there is a major difference between those things that Bill Clinton actually did to obstruct justice and what Bob Mueller seems to be saying nowadays.
Sir, you were a longtime Republican, left the party, became a libertarian during the Bush administration, and returned to the GOP in 2012. Are you happy with where the party is right now, and particularly where Donald Trump seems to be leading it?
The Republican Party does not have the leadership and the vision that it used to have many years ago, and that I think a major party in this country needs to have. So I have to say I'm very disappointed with the lack of vision and leadership in the Republican Party.
Finally, sir, the Clinton impeachment does seem to hang or cast a shadow over the Trump administration. Everybody seems so focused on the lessons from the Clinton impeachment, whether it be the political costs or the electoral results or whatever the case may be. Looking back, do you have any regrets about the impeachment and your efforts and role in impeaching Bill Clinton? You still think it was the right thing to do, even if it somehow in any way makes the nation less prepared to deal with Donald Trump?
The regret that I have is that the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives at the time did not allow us, those of us who had investigated what had gone on with the Clinton administration, they did not allow us to really get to the heart of what I would have considered and still consider far more serious matters than obstruction of justice and perjury. There was very clear evidence that the Clinton administration had engaged in very, very serious acts, violations of our foreign export technology control acts, our federal election laws, and that was the basis on which I had originally filed back in late 1997 an inquiry of impeachment. Yet we were not allowed to move forward with those investigations, which I continue to think were far more substantive violations than obstruction of justice and perjury.
Bob Barr is a former Republican congressman from Georgia. He was one of the Clinton impeachment managers. Congressman, I really enjoyed the back and forth. Thanks very much for the time.
Thank you, Andy.
And up next, my conversation with the writer for Salon, who says the president is intentionally appealing to white nationalists, and he's doing it as an election strategy.